Hi everyone, we're going to get started here in just a couple minutes, just waiting for a few more people to join, just a minute or two. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening everyone, depending on where you're located. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to join us for our webinar, The Challenges of APFS and How EnCase Can Help. My name is David Groskopf, and I'll be one of your hosts for this webinar. I'm a field marketer here at OpenText, and I joined OpenText through the recent acquisition of CAD Software, which is where I've been working since 2014. And throughout my time at Guidance, my focus has been mostly on providing marketing support for the forensic products, so for Tableau and EnCase Forensic. Today I'm happy to be joined by two EnCase subject matter experts, Harp Thukral and Simon Key. I'll let both of them introduce themselves in just a minute here, but first let's take a closer look at the agenda we're going to go through today. So following a few housekeeping items that I'm going to cover, Harp's going to give an overview of the OpenText Forensic solutions, as well as touch on each of the product enhancements included in the recent EnCase 8.07 release. During that overview, he'll spend a little bit of time explaining our approach to supporting APFS, the challenges of APFS, and how we plan to extend EnCase APFS capabilities in future product releases. We'll then play a pre-recorded section from Simon, who takes a deeper dive into APFS, goes into a little bit more of the technical information around it, and then also walks through a product demo of the current APFS support that's offered through EnCase. Harp will then end by talking about what's coming in the next release, EnCase 8.08, and then we'll have the live Q&A at the end, and we'll get to as many of your questions as time allows us to. So with that, just a few housekeeping items that I want to get through. Throughout the webinar, again, please remember to submit any questions that you have through the chat window for the Q&A at the end. Also, at the bottom of your screen, there are a few helpful widgets that I'd like to point out. The first one is a resources widget, where you can download any current product documentation for both EnCase Forensic and Tableau. One resource I'd like to point out in that area is the recently published SANS product review of EnCase Forensic 8.06. This was a third-party review of EnCase Forensic that was very favorable for us. SANS instructor Jake Williams kind of talks through his feedback on each of the specific product features that we've released recently, and then also how the tool now compares as a whole compared to other solutions out there. So if you're an EnCase 6 user or even an EnCase 7 user who hasn't yet tried EnCase 8, or if you're now just considering EnCase, then this product review that's available in that resources widget is highly recommended for you to read. Also, if you experience any technical issues during the webinar, there's a support widget at the bottom for troubleshooting. However, please know that we are also recording this webinar, and we'll be posting the on-demand version to our website, as well as emailing all attendees. So if you have any issues and miss part of the webinar, you can always go back and watch the recording at your own convenience. We also ask that you please take the time to complete the webinar survey at the conclusion of the webinar. The survey allows us to gather product feedback and presenter feedback, which helps us improve our future webinars. And also completing this survey will qualify you for your free chance to win an EnCase training course. So definitely take advantage of that opportunity. Lastly, if you have any questions following the webinar, then please visit our website, email us at experts@guide.com, or call us at 626-229-9191. I do want to take a quick moment and highlight our training offerings. This is the training course catalog that is currently available. We offer courses of all skill levels, from junior investigators to seasoned experts. We also offer a variety of different classroom options, from in-person to V-class to on-demand courses. A lot of different options available that can cover any of your training needs. I'd also like to point out our annual training passports that are available, which are a great value as they provide you with a year of unlimited training access. If you are interested in any training and would like more information about the training options that are available to you, then we definitely encourage you to contact our training department, which email is listed there, or visit our website. So again, today I'm lucky to be joined by two extremely knowledgeable EnCase experts, Harp and Simon. Harp is our product manager for EnCase, and Simon is an EnCase trainer and course developer. Simon, with that, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself just a little bit more?
Yeah. Hi, folks. Good to have your company. My name's Simon Key. I'm based in the UK from the Reading office. Been with OpenText again as a result of the takeover, which was with guidance since 2004. So before that was a cop for 17 and a half years. My wife's still a serving cop. My job is curriculum development, so most of the time I am updating, maintaining and creating new course content. Don't tend to teach that much, although I am about the only instructor now that teaches EnScript, and I also dip into Mac and the Mac course. If any of you done it, pretty much all of that's down to me. And it's because of that that I've got involved in APFS, gave a session about it 3 times at EnViews, and I've just added some APFS content into our new Mac course. So I think that's enough for me. I'll pass it over to Harp, if I may.
Hello everyone, my name is Harp Thukral and I'm the product manager for EnCase Forensic. My role here is to listen to your feedback and go back and see how we can create solutions for the problems you face on a day-to-day basis. That being said, I'd like to jump right in and talk about a few things, especially in terms of the acquisition of CAD Software by OpenText, and I want to be very clear that it's been really helpful, as within the past year our team has grown and we have access to more people, knowledge, and products. And hopefully you can see the results in the past year or so. Another thing which is really important for us is that we believe that we provide a comprehensive workflow with a combination of EnCase and Tableau product lines, all the way from triage to reporting, and I'll talk about that a little bit in the next slide. When we started designing version 8 of EnCase, we relied on your feedback and we used this workflow as a guide. And I want to go over it real quick so that way I can set the stage of what you can expect in the coming releases. The first step we considered, we believe, is part of the workflow is triage. EnCase allows you to examine the volatile data, including RAM, and assess for the presence of encryption. This is enhanced by encryption support. Since the amount of data investigations is growing, as we know, this is where triage is very helpful, it allows you to rank and filter the data, allowing you to collect the most relevant and important data for your investigation. The next step in the workflow is collect. This is where you would acquire the data in an efficient and secure manner in the court-accepted EX01, EO1, LX01, LO1 formats, which we invented, by the way. The next step is process. This is where the main core of the work happens, like decryption if the data is encrypted, hashing, file signature analysis, raw keyword searching, indexing, etc. The next step is EnCase. I want to point out that you do not have to follow to the process. You could directly jump to investigate if you like. But now that the processing is done, it's time to deep dive and do a forensic investigation. Like use the result sets from processing, you can bookmark, tag, view images, etc., and build your case. After that, maybe you want to collaborate. Maybe you want to send that data over to your attorney or your investigator. EnCase offers comprehensive reviewing capabilities. And finally, reporting. You need to create that customized, comprehensive, and detailed report. And you can do so for a wide variety of target audiences. and EnCase offers all those options for you. And now I want to quickly talk about a little bit about what our forensic portfolio looks like. We have three main product lines. We have EnCase Forensic, we have Mobile Investigator, and then we have the Tableau hardware forensic solutions which we have. This covers the entire digital forensic workflow, which I explained in the previous screen. So what are the other value adds which we have along with our software? I think the biggest one is training, which Dave talked about a little bit ago in his presentation when he talked about it. I believe that's the most important pillar, and we excel at that with the industry-recognized NCE, NCEP, and CFSR certifications and 16 courses, along with other value adds such as EnCase Processor, which is the ability to spin off multiple processors so that you can use those additional workstations which are sitting there catching dust. And finally, EnCase App Central. This has a variety of EnScripts, which are primarily community-driven and help extend EnCase. And finally, licensing. We have various options from perpetual to term to site and academic programs. With EnCase, you also get the widest range of file systems and operating system support for parsing, snapshot, volatile memory. As you can see, from Windows, Linux, macOS, Android, iOS, Solaris, various other options. EnCase also supports the most number of encryptions, from checkpoint to BitLocker to semantic, etc. And we're continuously upgrading and updating to the latest versions. Okay, so that was a quick overview. Now I'd like to take a few minutes and talk about what we did in our very latest release, which is version 8.07. We released this in April of this year, and I believe it's added a lot of value, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about it. So one of the first things we delivered with 8.07 is APFS support, and also the topic of this webinar. This is Apple's latest file system. It was released along with High Sierra macOS, and it's quite different from anything else you will see it. We support acquisition using Tableau and EnCase, snapshot and parsing, the exception being encryption, which we're working on currently, and will be adding support in the coming releases of EnCase. What are the challenges we face? Well, Apple is a walled garden, and they truly do not want anyone to be able to decipher or figure out the inner workings of APFS. So there is not a published guide which you could refer to. So we had engineers essentially reverse engineer the whole process. And we were able to figure out most of how APFS works under the hood. However, that being said, we can't say that we've tested every single scenario or use case. And I would like to encourage you to reach out to tech support or me or your contact, and we can make sure that your issue is resolved and your edge case is covered. We have a few items which we have not added yet for the future of APFS. That's what we're going to be concentrating on, like encryption, snapshot, and we'll continue adding those and refining our support for APFS. And finally, how do we extend the EnCase APFS capabilities which we already added? I want to encourage you to explore our App Central, which I talked about briefly, where capabilities of APFS get extended every day using EnScripts, and it's part of our community-based solutions, and most of the time they'll be free. So it's something I urge you to explore. But continuing on to what we delivered in 8.07, the next thing which we released is volume shadow copy. And this has been part of EnCase for a long time, actually, via EnScript. Well, what we did was we took it and redesigned it from the ground up and made it part of the core. Volume shadow copy is like snapshots, which are taken by Windows. They help investigators uncover deleted and modified files. Use cases, user says they did not have certain files, having access to volume shadow copy data can show otherwise, and help build your case. Examples of type of investigations we have seen this used in are like child exploitation cases, intellectual property investigation, malware analysis. Anywhere you'd like to see how the files of change are being deleted, you can use volume shadow copy. Now, the way our solution works is that after you have added your evidence into EnCase, you would navigate to Tools, Analyze Volume Shadow Copies. You would see volume shadow copies which are present in that evidence. you can select one or more snapshots, and you have two options. You can say, you know what, just give me the deleted and modified files. Or the second option is, you can ask EnCase to rebuild the hard drive as it existed, including the data which exists in the evidence. So you're essentially recreating the hard drive as it existed on that time. Once you've decided what you want to do, let's say you decided the modified and deleted files, you can take it one step further and you can say, hey, you know what, let's filter the files to maybe just images or just PDFs because that's all I care about. And so you can apply those conditions which you've created in EnCase to your data. The end result is you end up with some kind of EX01 or LX01, depending on what you selected, into your evidence tab. That's where you continue investigation as you would like any other piece of that. So that's volume shadow copy. That's also released as part of 807. We did other updates, including encryption updates. So we added support for BitLocker on Windows 10 XT AES, updated semantic whole disk encryption, the Dell Data Protection 8.17. Again, a lot of updates there. Next thing which we did is mobile. So a lot of people are not aware is that EnCase by default supports more than 27,000 different mobile device types, including mobile phones, smart devices like Alexa, drones, you name it. We can do acquisition of all of those for free in EnCase. If you have an EnCase license, you can pretty much do that. But we have a companion application called Mobile Investigator, which allows you to actually parse the data which you've acquired as part of the acquisition. Well, we're continuously updating those, and this is what you see. We have updated like Telegram and Instagram and the Snapchat, and those kind of application supports have been added as part of that. Along with that, the capability to encrypted iOS backups, Excel reports, dual SIM cards, JTAG bin. So those are the kind of updates we have done on Mobile Investigator. We've added a couple more things, actually. One of the coolest things which I believe we've added is iCloud backups, but that's just one option. We support around 8 or 9 cloud acquisition backups methodology, including Google Drive, Facebook, Twitter. So essentially, we have two ways of doing that. What we do is, one, if the user has ever installed iTunes as example on a computer, we can then take the auth key data without having the user's credential and be able to acquire all that cloud data and bring it back into EnCase. The other way is that if you know the user's credentials, we will prompt your dialog box, you put the user's credentials in, and we will download that data and make it offline to make it part of investigation. So that's iCloud backup, but a similar methodology applies to all cloud assets, as you will see. We also added support for larger hard drives, more than 10 terabytes, and finally, we fixed 50 plus custom issues in 807. So a lot of good updates going in. That's 807. With that, I'd like to actually pass it on to David back again.
Thanks, Harp. A lot of really good information. So again, that's 807. If you want to reference any of that, that's available on the website from our release notes, and also within any of the product documentation. We're going to go ahead and play the demo now that Simon's pre-recorded. It's about a 20-minute recording where he dives into the technical side of APFS and shows a product walkthrough within EnCase. We'll then come back and Harp will finish up with what's coming in 808, and then we'll do the live Q&A. So again, keep your questions coming in the chat.
Okay, good morning, afternoon or evening folks, wherever you may be. Time is short, so I'm going to use a presentation from my section of the webinar. It'll keep me on track and avoid a lot of unnecessary mouse movement. Many of you will no doubt be wondering why Apple introduced a new file system. Well, HFS Plus is showing its age now, and like many other file systems, was designed to minimize the seek time of moving disks. APFS, on the other hand, was designed to make use of the fact that this is irrelevant where SSD drives are concerned, so it's much more flexible when it comes to using disk space. The file system was introduced as the default in iOS 10.3. Standalone SSD drives are automatically converted to APFS when macOS 10.13 is installed. It's possible to override this behavior using a command line switch, but most users won't be aware of this. Some of the file system's most significant features are listed here. We will be discussing snapshots, space sharing, native encryption and crash protection in more depth shortly. It's particularly important to remember that APFS is not trivial. As we shall see shortly, there are no fixed volume boundaries and blocks read by one volume can be used by another. In order to find data quickly, APFS links blocks together to form B-trees such that each B-tree block is referred to as a node. Unlike HFS Plus and NTFS, APFS doesn't use any internal files, although EnCase displays some APFS data in a file-like manner. One thing that makes APFS more difficult to parse is that nodes with volume-specific IDs are located using something called location or object map B-trees. These enable APFS to determine the physical ID of a node given its node ID. The physical offset of a node in an APFS container is calculated by multiplying its block ID by the block size, which is usually 4096 bytes. It's important to be absolutely clear that what we know about APFS has been obtained by reverse engineering. Apple haven't released any source code, at least none that we know about. Without source code, it's impossible to know how APFS will behave in every scenario. So there may be times when you need to use more than one tool and/or an examination Mac for validation purposes. These slides are designed to give you a high-level overview of how an APFS container is organized. Right at the beginning, we have a structure called the master superblock. This is used to locate each volume in the APFS container. A volume is represented by a volume superblock, which is similar to the volume header structure in other file systems. However, an APFS volume superblock doesn't mark the start of anything. It contains pointers to each volume's object map and catalog B-tree. On any reasonable sized APFS volume, the catalog B-tree will consist of a root node with one or more levels of child node. The depth of the tree will depend on the number of records it contains. The records at the lowest level of the catalog B-tree contain the name, metadata and extended attributes of the files and folders in the APFS volume. They also point to the APFS blocks containing each file's data. As we can see from this slide, there is no segregation of data from different volumes. Two different files may be located in blocks that are adjacent to each other. As we shall see, this makes life interesting when it comes to the recovery of deleted data. It almost goes without saying that being able to examine the file system of any machine under investigation is crucial. Thankfully, when it comes to Mac and Apple devices, EnCase now has fundamental support for APFS. This support will be enhanced over time. From a day-to-day perspective, the fact that APFS is in use probably won't make that much difference to examiners any more than it does to the end user. Files and folders in an APFS volume look pretty much the same as any file system. That said, HFS Plus has some very useful artifacts which are also supported by APFS and parsed by EnCase as a matter of course. We will be looking at a couple of examples of these shortly. Those of you who know me know that I'm a huge fan of EnScript, and being able to use EnScript to parse APFS data is just as useful as other file systems. I'll be demonstrating this as well. Okay, so let's move on and have a look at parsing APFS data in EnCase. So in this case, I'm actually using a beta version of EnCase 808, which has some basic APFS encryption support. There are two evidence files in this case, one of which is encrypted. These evidence files have been selected, so I can go ahead and use the Open button to open them. Having entered the password for the encrypted evidence file, which EnCase has detected, I can go ahead and click on OK. Both APFS disks have been parsed, and we can now see the single APFS volume on the encrypted disk. I'll go ahead and expand that. As already mentioned, the files and folder in this volume don't look much different to any other Mac volume. Note the presence of the Movies folder. I'll use the Set Include option to expand that. I'll now go ahead and expand the pics folder. We can now see a folder called Incredibles 2. I'll go ahead and highlight that. This folder contains a couple of JPEG files. They have weird names, but that's nothing to do with APFS. Let me switch to Gallery View. Okay, let's have a look at the file with index number 1. So this file is clearly an innocuous movie poster, but what if it was something a little more serious and we wanted to know where it came from? Let's go back to Table View. One of the great things about APFS is that it supports extended attributes and file system permissions just like HFS+. This isn't on the off chance that they might prove useful. They're both crucial to the way in which Mac operates. I'll expand the view pane and then switch to the Permissions tab so that we can take a look at its contents first. Here we can see how EnCase has read the file system permissions for the file in focus. There's no visible difference between these permissions and those that would be seen on a HFS+ volume because APFS has to maintain a substantial degree of backwards compatibility. Let's now turn our attention to the Attributes tab. EnCase groups attributes according to their source. In this case, the Extended Attributes folder itself has the focus. The attributes in this folder have been read from APFS Extended Attribute records in the Catalog B tree. They provide a great deal of useful information, including the fact that the user has tagged the file, which indicates guilty knowledge of it, where the file was downloaded from, and that it was downloaded using the Chrome browser. Had we the time, we could decode the hex encoded timestamp in the quarantine attribute to obtain even more information. I'll go ahead and scroll down in the tree pane and switch the view to the Messages Photos folder for another example of how useful the Attributes tab can be. Here we see a number of JPEG files, including one called img_0703.jpg. Believe it or not, this is one of the photos of my wife's new car, which she sent me from her iPhone. I saved this and several other photos from the Messages application onto the APFS disk that we're examining. Note that the focus has shifted to the root of the Attributes tab. I'll go ahead and switch back to the Extended Attributes folder and expand the bottom pane a little. The Extended Attributes folder contains 6 attributes. The bottom one is a quarantine attribute telling us that the photo did indeed come from the Messages application. Skipping to the top of the list, we have an attribute telling us the last used date, which also contains a hex encoded timestamp. We then have a downloaded date timestamp, the name of the sender, and their telephone number. This is all really useful stuff. Now, let's turn our attention to the use of EnScript. Whilst not specifically relating to APFS, viewing the attributes of multiple files is definitely something that you might want to do when examining Mac data, particularly as the Attributes tab is reset whenever the focus shifts to another file. To demonstrate, I'll switch back to the pictures from the Incredibles 2 movie that we saw a second ago. As we saw earlier, the picture now in focus has been tagged with the Incredibles 2 tag. If we clicked on the other picture in this folder, we would see the same. Whilst this is okay for 1 or 2 files, what if we wanted to see and compare all of the attributes from all of the files in this volume? That would be quite difficult. However, we can accomplish it by installing an EnScript called the Attribute Helper plugin. I'll go ahead and do that using the EnScript launcher on the EnScript tab. The plugin that I want to install is already in the path being monitored for EnScripts by EnCase. Great, we've been able to find the Attribute Helper plugin. You yourself can give this a try by downloading it from the link that's shown here. I'll go ahead and click on OK to install the plugin so it's ready for use. To use the plugin, we need to select the folders and files whose attributes we wish to examine. I'll select the APFS Volumes root folder from the tree pane. We can now right-click anywhere in the table pane and activate the plugin using the appropriate context menu option. There's a lot going on in this slide, but I'll do my best to explain what's happening. In the left-hand pane, we can see a tree view that has integrated the files and folders in our case with their attributes. Each set of attributes for a file or folder is stored in a folder called root attribute. The Set Include option has been applied so we can see all of the files, folders and attributes in the table pane, which has been sorted first by type, then by name and then by value. By scrolling down the list of items in the table pane, I've been able to find and select 3 tag attributes referring to the Incredibles movie. By following the blue checks in the folder pane, I've been able to identify the fact that a video file has been tagged with the same tag. We could of course have used a condition to perform a similar task, but this script is doubly useful because it enables us to bookmark one or more attributes from multiple files in a single action. We now need to consider a number of issues that we need to be aware of when parsing APFS volumes. The first is determining prior ownership of unused APFS blocks. To demonstrate the issues associated with the ownership of unallocated blocks, each of the volumes on the unencrypted APFS disk contains pictures with a specific theme. In the case of the doggies volume shown here, there are several pictures of my dogs. Let me switch to the LA volume. The pictures shown here are from filming locations in LA. Let's have a look at the private volume. Here we see a number of pictures with a yellow banner. Let's have a look at the work volume. These pictures show the OpenText office in the UK and a training venue in the Netherlands. Now that we know what types of pictures have been stored in each volume, let's remove the Set Include option and take a look at the files and other objects in the root of the work volume. The important thing to note here is that there is no unallocated clusters object, because unused blocks, once freed, are available for use by any volume. Let's have a look then at the files and other objects in the root of the APFS container. We can now see the unallocated clusters object representing blocks available for allocation to any APFS volume. Let's see what happens when we search that object for JPEG pictures. We can now see a picture deleted from the doggies volume, one deleted from the work volume, one deleted from the LA volume, and several deleted from the private volume. This is a good demonstration of how an APFS unallocated clusters object may contain deleted files from multiple volumes. Note the picture of one of my dogs, Flower. We will be coming back to this shortly to demonstrate the potential for APFS file recovery, which will enable us to match this file to its source volume. Before that, we need to have a word about the consequences of APFS encryption on the recovery of deleted files. APFS encryption has a significant impact on the potential for recovering deleted files. Although encryption is set at the container level, it is implemented at the block level and tied to the host volume. Once released, encrypted blocks stay encrypted. Decrypting them would require the source volume and original volume block ID to be identified. Taking this into account, it's unlikely that recognizable file data will be located unless it exists in blocks that were unused before the container was encrypted. It is worth noting that decrypting an APFS container will only decrypt blocks that are in use. Unlike HFS+, an APFS container is not wrapped in an outer core storage layer that can be decrypted from beginning to end. Core storage is actually deconstructed on non-Fusion HFS+ system disks that are converted to APFS. The next thing we need to consider is the presence of volume allocation files. We've already seen the unencrypted APFS containers volume shown in the folder pane. In this slide, they're also visible in the table pane. Note how, interspersed with these volumes, which are also folders, there are several volume allocation files with similar names, but starting with a dollar symbol. These are volume allocation files consisting of the blocks in use by each volume. They're created by EnCase to calculate the unallocated blocks in the container. The data in these files is duplicated elsewhere, so you should avoid searching them for text or other data. We now need to turn our attention to issues associated with parsing APFS object maps. We've talked about object maps previously. Without them, we cannot locate the B-tree nodes needed to parse APFS volumes. Object maps appear to exist in their most current state in memory, which can cause problems when trying to parse offline dirty APFS volumes or those that are mounted in a running system. If EnCase can't read the latest version of a volume's object map, it will attempt to do so using the last checkpoint. This may not always work, and if it does, the data shown by EnCase may not be up to date. It's important to note that parsing live volumes can be problematic regardless of the file system. That said, APFS appears to be more problematic than most. The last thing that I'm going to cover today is the potential for deleted data recovery using APFS checkpoints and volume snapshots. APFS checkpoints are created for file system recoverability purposes. The master superblock is actually a copy of the latest checkpoint superblock. APFS checkpoints aren't directly accessible by the user. Volume snapshots are used to maintain local time machine backups. They are accessible via the time machine interface. They can also be mounted with the mount command by specifying the device node and snapshot name. Both provide additional scope for APFS data recovery but aren't yet supported by EnCase. That said, we can use an EnScript to demonstrate the principles of checkpoint recovery. In this slide, we see the unencrypted APFS evidence file with the APFS container replaced by a raw partition that hasn't been parsed by EnCase. Having highlighted the pseudo unallocated cluster object in that container, we can run the APFS parser proof of concept script and tell it to parse a nominated checkpoint superblock rather than the master superblock. In this case, checkpoint superblock 52 has been chosen by previous trial and error. By parsing the checkpoint superblock, the script is able to locate and bookmark all of the APFS catalog records that would facilitate complete recovery of the picture of my dog Flower, as well as all the other deleted files that we saw earlier. We don't have the time to explain everything in view here, but we can quickly highlight the extent record referencing the file's data in its entirety. We can also highlight the main APFS file record containing the file's timestamps, BSD permissions, and other core file system metadata.
the bookmark comment can be expanded to see all of the data read by the script. Okay folks, that marks the end of my section of this webinar. Thanks for listening. I hope you found it useful. I'll be hanging around till the end if you've got any questions.
Thanks, Simon. That was really well said. Very detailed. Back to you, Harp.
All right. So hopefully you liked that presentation which Simon just gave. I want to quickly talk about what you can expect in 808, and this will take less than a minute, and then we'll open up for questions. But our focus for the upcoming release of EnCase Endpoint Investigator and Forensic is going to be on the following 4 themes. So the first thing we're going to concentrate is more cloud assets. So we'll be adding the capability to acquire from more cloud resources, including Office 365 and SharePoint and those kind of things. And then the next theme we're going to be concentrating on for 808 is going to be file system updates. This is where, we'll continue adding support for the Apple file system. As example, we added you saw we've already added the encryption support for APFS, but it's not released. What you saw was 808 in action there in Simon's presentation there. And we'll continue adding also other encryption supports like Vera, SHA-2, and Symantec. And finally, our commitment to you is to continue updating the artifacts to the latest releases so that when you do investigations, you get the most up-to-date results. That's going to be the core of what we'll be delivering in our next release. That's all I have. Back to you, David.
Thanks, Harp. All right, so that concludes the presentation part of the webinar. We'll open it up for the Q&A, and we have quite a few questions that have come in, so we'll just jump right into it and get to as many as we can. So Harp, Simon, feel free to jump in if there's any that you see that you want to take.
Thanks, David. I just wanted to pick up on the point that was made about, there's obviously a lot of competition in the forensic market, and what do we bring to the table. I just want to turn it on its head a little bit and just want to make it absolutely clear that from a forensic perspective, I, for one, don't advocate the use of just one tool. My background is law enforcement. I'm, used to validating and verifying all the evidence that we produce. And on top of that, you're just not going to get one tool that does everything. When you're dealing with something as new as APFS, you've got to be realistic from a perspective of, file systems like NTFS have been out for, even though Microsoft have never released the source code, they've been out for decades, and we've been able to test them exhaustively, whereas APFS has come out very, very recently. So, I wish, I could, make it all nice and fluffy around the edges and say everything's hunky-dory and everything's 100%. But the reality of the situation is that a lot of the work that we and other forensic vendors have done has had to be based on reverse engineering. So it's one of those things I would actually encourage you, look at other tools. We're not saying, just come to EnCase. You want a good set of tools because it will give you, a lot more scope, and you can be, a lot more comfortable with your findings. I hope that makes sense to you folks. I don't know whether Hart wants to jump in with anything that he saw, just while I'm having another look through the other questions.
Yes. So real quick, I'll answer some of the non-APFS questions which have been asked real quick. So like, for example, one of the questions which I saw was, do we support BitLocker XDA? So yes, when is that going to get resolved? That's already added in 807 as example. What kind of data can we get from Snapchat? It's essentially whatever we can recover from the SQLite database which supports that. We are able to parse and pull at that. We are happy to show a demo. And then finally, I'll jump back into APFS and talk a little about the various types of encryption. I saw a bunch of questions whether we support File Vault, Firewall 2, or APFS encryption. The demo which you just saw, which Simon did, is APFS encryption. So there's three different encryptions at play in the APFS sphere right now, with the Apple sphere, I should say. So they started off with Firewall, then they introduced Firewall 2, and now they have APFS. Well, they didn't want to really get rid of Firewall 2 altogether and say we're transitioning to that. So I believe the way it works, and Simon can correct me, but essentially the volume level is encrypted today with Firewall 2, and then your files are actually encrypted using APFS encryption. Well, what we have added support is APFS encryption in this coming release. However, we are also looking into Firewall 2 to add that support as fast as we can, and we're hoping to get it in 808, but I will not like to promise because it's a reverse engineering process. It's not like we have a guide, just follow step by step and we're done. So that'll be the answer to that. Okay.
So if I just step in there, Harp, as well, just to clarify that one of the reasons why APFS was released, because HFS Plus doesn't have native support for encryption. So HFS Plus encrypted volumes actually, the volume itself is not technically encrypted. It sits in an encrypted container that is provided by core storage. So actually, if you upgrade a Mac to 1013 and you've got SSD drives in there, if the system drive is a standalone drive, then what happens is as part of the conversion process, the actual core storage and the file vault 2 that we're used to dealing with actually gets deconstructed because it impacts on the performance gain that APFS provides with SSDs. So actually, core storage is removed when APFS is installed. So then what happens is actually it's the internal APFS encryption that takes over, and that's much more efficient because of the way that it works. And that's one of the reasons why Apple invented it effectively. So effectively what happens is the old file vault 2, the core storage that we're used to dealing with, actually gets deconstructed. So in some ways, it actually does us a favour because we don't have core storage support at the moment. My understanding, I mean, Hart will probably put me right here. I think it's one of the things that's is on our roadmap. But at the moment, we haven't quite got it. But like I say, you saw there with the demonstration that the APFS volume that I was working with was decrypted just fine, even though we still don't have that core storage support. So I hope that helps to clear things up a little bit.
Okay. We've answered a bunch of the encryption questions. We're going to try to pick another one and see if we can answer some of them. One of the questions which we got was related to encrypted iCloud backups, even though that's not related to APFS. The way it works is we prompt you a dialog box for you to put the credentials in. If you don't have that, then the next step is we could try to use the auth key and see if we can get the data out. That could be a secondary approach. And if all else fails, then the integration with Password can help you crack, but there's no guarantee as to how long that would take to crack, as example. Let's see. Do you want to pick another one, Simon?
I was just typing a answer to a question about handling clone files in APFS. They're actually very straightforward. One of the evidence files that I used on the demo, you might have actually noticed that the doggy files, there were 2 copies of each picture. Each of those copies was a clone. So we actually pass those. They're fairly straightforward. When you look at how they're implemented at the file system level, they're actually quite easy to handle. The other thing I'll just throw in, I did answer it online, but had somebody ask about APFS on the Mac course, and yes, that's just been added. So we've got HFS Plus and APFS. Perhaps not for the faint-hearted, but if you want to know exactly how it works, then as much as we can, APFS is more complicated because there's an additional layer on top of the block structure because of the object map, which makes life really quite tricky. But we go as much as we're able on the course now. I'm just wading through some of the other questions as we speak.
Yeah, so I'm just going through the questions myself, and I'll answer a few more. So one of the questions which we have is imaging with APFS macOS possible with EnCase Imager? Will it recognize the target test mode? I do not believe we have that capability with EnCase Imager today. However, we are working to add to it. The way we provide that solution is with Tableau, and that's the easiest way we can do that. So that's the first question. The second question which I see here is EnCase focusing on the entire Office 365 suite? Yes, we are. You will get Office 365 on-premise, cloud, SharePoint, OneDrive. All of it will be coming as part of the future roadmap. Is it possible to get a demo image for the test purposes? I do not think that's possible. However, we can give you a demo environment and giving you instructions on how you can create your own. Okay, so I'll go through another few more questions here real quick. What info is needed to determine the encryption key for APFS? That's a question probably, Simon, you can answer.
Sorry, Harp, I missed that. I was looking at another question when you said. I missed
there's a question about what info is needed to determine the encryption key for APFS.
What information is needed? I'm not quite sure sort of what that is aimed at. I mean, in general, the way that it's implemented, there is either going to be one or more user login passwords that will facilitate decryption. So the system has to be configured to say which users are allowed to unlock. My understanding is from when if EnCase will provide you give it at least one password that it recognises, it will be able to do the decryption. We don't, as far as I know at the moment, because just so as people are aware, I mean Apple have very good support for corporate customers because it's in their best interests for corporates to be able to gain access to encrypted data if they're legally entitled to do so. So there are some very good, Apple have produced a very good guide on encryption in the corporate domain, which basically talks through the process of adding a second level of encryption using an encryption key that the corporate body would have access to, and then you can gain decrypted access that way. Now, at the moment, I don't think we support that, but I think it's on the roadmap. So at the moment, it's password only based decryption, but if our guys do their stuff, and I'm sure they will, then we should be able to support the public-private key type of decryption that Apple supports from a corporate perspective. By far and away, the trickiest thing, just to reiterate with APFS, is that with a lot of other file systems, we've been really spoilt by the ability to parse file systems when they're actually online and are mounted. With APFS, it's much more difficult because of the way that memory is used and the way in which the object maps play kicks in. So if you're looking at live examinations, or you're looking at examinations of a volume that's not been cleanly dismounted, then they're the two that are most likely to cause problems, and obviously with the encryption as well. I don't want to, like I said, I wish I could make it all nice and fluffy, but that's the reality of the situation. Is that Apple, if you talk to them, they will say, well, hey, we don't support parsing this file system. Well, we've got it mounted because we're changing data as it happens. So for those of you folks that are wanting to do examinations online, you are going to find it more tricky. There's no point in telling fibs to you. That's the way that it is, I'm afraid. So I don't know whether I can answer any of these other ones. There were a lot of questions about that using the secondary decryption key. I'm hoping we'll get that that support as soon as we can. We're keenly aware. I'm sure Harp will back me up on that. Just how important it is to you folks. So yeah, we'll get it done as soon as we can.
Right. Absolutely. And then just a quick few more questions I will answer, which are related. So, like, for example, one of the question is, when is 808 going to release? We are anticipating first week of October, so that's when it will be publicly available. Another question which we have is the webinar recorded? Yes, it is, and it will be published very soon. Okay. Let's see what other questions I can answer. Just going through it, sorry. Oh yeah, one of the other questions is is this only that box investigation, or can we actually use a live system? Yes, you can use live system. The agent or the servlet, whatever you want to call it, is able to take a snapshot and bring it back into EnCase for examination. So you can do live parsing. Just remember that we don't support encryption today in 807, but with 808 that issue will be resolved. So that's the news. Another question which I saw was, if I disable firewall 2, then would I be able to do the parsing? Yes, you can. Just disable firewall 2, and you'll be able to get the data and parse it with EnCase. Another question which I see is, when is Vira supported? It's coming in 808.
Probably got time for another question here, Harp.
Okay. Well, I'll answer one more and I'll pass it on to you, Simon. One question is, how much development will go into acquisition of APFS systems? That's a tough question to answer. It depends on what we need. We've identified, essentially 1 to 2 features of APFS to solve every release. Well, we can, because we can give everything to it. And one final question which I see here is, will we support Mac memory acquisition? Yes, you will see that in 808. Back to you, Simon.
Okay. I'm just looking at one question there. Can you parse an image from BlackBag? I'm sorry to say I haven't used BlackBag. I mean, obviously those guys know an awful lot about, Macs, and I know a lot of the law enforcement colleagues that I still talk to, have both tools, and I can't argue with that. As I already said, I would wholeheartedly recommend having more than one tool, and BlackBag would be a good choice. Contrary to what a lot of people think about us, actually, like I say, we advocate more than one tool because, especially with something as new as APFS, it's good from a point of view of validation purposes. I don't know about the output of the image from BlackBag. I know there's one of their guys had put a very interesting post about encryption. If you haven't already seen it, you might want to go and have a look at the website. But I can't speak for BlackBag images themselves. I've not actually worked with them. I'm just trying to have a look through. I'm just conscious that a lot of you ask questions, and I don't want you to go unanswered. Just to reiterate the fact that an APFS disk is still just a disk. So if you've got, physical hands onto it, or you can access a Mac using target disk mode, Thunderbolt target and disk mode, or however you do it, if you acquire it at a block level, it is still a block level device, and that gives you the best options, because whether you take it and mount it on a Mac, or you put it into EnCase, it's still just a block level device. So if you acquire sector by sector, the actual acquisition option is exactly the same. It's the actual parsing of the file system that is the tricky bit. So I hope that clarifies things. David, did you want to
I would like to. I just want to add real quick at the very end, guys. I know that there have been instances where you feel like we are unable to parse the APFS file system, and we did have a fix in 808, which essentially relates to 4K drives, where we figured out that the partition boot sector does not show right where it should in the second block, but shows eight blocks of buffers, or 8 sectors buffer, and we fixed that issue, and hopefully you'll see that. But this is a great example. If you have an issue, please reach out to us. Please give us some feedback, because that's the only way we can improve ourselves and build our next release. So I would encourage you to reach out to me. If you don't have my email address, I can easily get you that. Email me and we'll get your issue resolved. Back to you, David.
Thanks, Harp. So there's still a few questions coming in. I'll give Harp and Simon a few more minutes to answer. I know we're over, but it seems like there's a lot of interest. So Harp, Simon, feel free to keep grabbing a couple. We'll stay on for another 5 to 10 minutes.
Okie doke, just looking through as we speak.
So one of the questions which I see is, does EnCase support any public-private key decryption other than APFS? Not currently. The one which we are working on right now is APFS. We do support other encryption types, but like, for example, the semantic and those, I'm not sure if you could apply that to APFS. I do not know the answer to that.
Yeah, there's a question: with all of the metadata contained in APFS and accessed via Spotlight in macOS, has there been any research into an EnScript can parse this data? I've always done Mac examinations on a Mac because of this. Well, I think on the demonstration, you probably have seen how much metadata EnCase parses now. It parses metadata from at least 2 sources. It parses it from APFS and HFS plus extended attributes. It also parses additional metadata from within HFS plus catalog file records, and it also parses information from a little file called the dsstore file, which is created in any folder where the user visits in the GUI. So the dsstore file contains folder view settings. It also contains settings, things like if you put a comment on a file in the Mac Finder program, then that actually gets put in a couple of places. It gets put, as I think you've already seen on the demo, it gets put into an extended attribute on APFS, but it also typically goes into the dsstore file as well. And we also, the dsstore file is passed by EnCase as a matter of course, because it contains the previous location of files that are in the trash. So we get an awful lot of stuff out, an awful lot of extended attributes from those sources. Now, I know in the past I've seen 1 or 2 little bits of additional information that have been stored by the Spotlight metadata base. But being honest with you, I mean, one of my things that I would love to know is the structure of that, and I don't. So I can't help with that. I don't know whether Black Bag have got anything further. I think I saw some reference to a webinar they were doing about it. But it's one of those big unanswered questions as to how we parse the Spotlight metadata database. It's not a pleasant database. And it's made more complicated because typically you can't use the MDLS command to read data out of Spotlight database unless it's on a volume to which the Mac's got read-only access. So sometimes you even have to mess about shadow mounting a copy of the image to gain access to that. So I hope that answers the question in some way. So yeah, and I'll carry on looking.
So another thing which I saw here is, can we get a free version? So we have a commitment to law enforcement, and we're happy to talk about it further, so please feel free to reach out. Meanwhile, we also have trial licenses, which we are happy to give out if somebody wants to try it out, on a basis, we can evaluate and we can give you a trial license to try it out. Make sure you can do it. That's one question. What about parsing system data such as logs, events, etc.? Well, that's a great question, and I think you have to treat it like just on any other file system. So we've added support to acquire memory, and we'll look at what other events and logs we can capture from Mac in the future releases. Sorry, there's a lot of duplicated questions, so I'm trying to go through these and make sure I'm not repeating myself.
Yeah, we'll give it another minute here too, Harp. Let's answer maybe one or two more. If we don't get to your question, we definitely apologize, and we will follow up after the webinar. As we mentioned, you can also submit questions through the website or contact us post-webinar. But Harp, Simon, if you see any others, feel free to address. Otherwise, we'll come to a conclusion here.
So another one which I saw is cloud acquisition part of 807, or is it add-on? It's part of EnCase 807, so you do not have to purchase anything extra. It's built in. It does not cost you anything.
It's not an Apple question, but there's one question about the status support for BitLocker XTS AES. Well, we support that now. So I think that came out in 807, Harp. Is it 806 or 807, I think?
807 is when we released that, yes. Another question which I see is gray key imports. Even though that's again not APFS related, but Mac OS related, we are working with David Miles and his group to get that into EnCase. So it's an ongoing process. Please stand by on that.
All right. Any others that you guys are seeing, Harp, Simon?
A lot of them, but these are some of them. We'll have to create like a FAQ almost, so because it's not a small answer, we'll have to spend some time explaining. So maybe we can take as an action item, David, to create like a FAQ, which we can post, which we can relay back to everyone on this, so that they can all share that answer.
Yeah, absolutely. We typically have FAQ documents on the website, so yeah, definitely something we can do. Simon, did you have anything else you wanted to add? Or?
Just a quickie in relation, there's a couple of folks that have asked about only seeing the master container superblock folder. That folder is created by EnCase whenever it passes any APFS disk. So if you're only seeing that, then it's not like EnCase is parsing bits and not parsing everything. There's a problem, and I'd ask you folks to get in touch with tech services. The 808 version that I used on the demo for pretty much, I think every person that contacted us that was given the 808 actually solved the problem. So if you were only seeing that master container superblock folder, then please get in touch and let us know. With the best will in the world, folks, we just can't generate the sort of data that you see on a day-to-day basis. So the more information that you can send our way. I know it's really difficult with some of the stuff that you have to look at, and a lot of it's confidential or or unlawful. But as much as you can help us, that helps us to help you. So thanks so much.
Yeah. Absolutely. In fact, if you cannot share evidence, that's okay too. We can do a WebEx share session, whatever we need to do to figure out what's going on. We are happy to jump on and resolve issues, especially when it comes to APFS.
All right. Thanks, Harp. Thanks, Simon. Thanks to all the attendees for joining. So that concludes our webinar today. I hope you found it interesting. And again, if you have any further questions, please do feel free to visit our website and contact us. We're happy to follow up. Thanks again. Have a great day. Bye.